Reeve Aleutian Airways was an airline headquartered in Anchorage, Alaska, United States. It ceased operations on December 5, 2000. History. Founding In February 1946, Bob Reeve received a call informing him that some ex-USAF C-47s and Douglas DC-3s were for sale. Reeve bought his first DC-3 for $20,000 with $3,000 down and the balance payable over 3 years. The cost of conversion to civilian standard was quoted at $50,000, but Reeve did the work himself at a cost of $5,000. A strike by sailors on steamships operating between Seattle and Anchorage started on April 6, 1946. Reeve, along with Merritt Boyle and Bill Ballin, began flying between Seattle and Anchorage, with stops at Juneau, Yakutat or Annette Island. Each trip carried a full load of 21 passengers and took an average of 9-1 over 2 hours. In 53 days, 26 round trips were made. Reeve would work all night on inspections and maintenance of the plane at Spokane, and then fly back to Anchorage having had very little sleep. Reeve earned $93,000 from this activity, enough to pay for the DC-3 and buy 3 more. In July 1946 another DC-3 was purchased from the USAF. In the winter of 1946 a Euro 47, Reeve filed with the CAA for a license to operate on the 1,783 miles run between Anchorage and Attu, and in the summer of 1947 he was making weekly flights down the chain. Within a year, he was running a twice-weekly service, keeping all 4 DC-3s busy. It was during this time that Reeve Aleutian suffered its first accident. DC-3 N46567 being damaged in an accident during takeoff at Merrill Field. The aircraft was insured, and Reeve bought a twin-engine Beechcraft and a Lockheed Electra 10B to replace the DC-3, which was subsequently repaired and eventually sold. On March 24, 1947, Reeve Aleutian Airways was incorporated. The company was running scheduled and charter services all over Alaska, despite not having a formal CAA certificate. About this time, Reeve was ordered to get authorization to use the wartime chain bases he was using. Reeve flew to Washington and leased Dutch Harbor Field and acquired landing permits for Kodiak, Adak and Attu. Electra North Carolina, 14994 was traded in during 1947, going to Continental Airlines. In April 1948, Reeve Aleutian Airways was granted a temporary, 5-year airline certificate. With the need to run the business on proper business lines, the Beechcraft and Electra were traded in for 2 Sikorsky S-43 amphibians. In October 1948, Port Heden was deactivated, followed by Dutch Harbor, Attu and Umnik. Reeve took over Umnik and conceded Attu, which was not vital to his operations. About this time, the Naval Air Transport Service began selling tickets to Adak in competition with Reeve. Reeve went to Washington and met with Louis Johnson, who granted all the business in the area to Reeve. In 1948 another DC-3, a Sikorsky S-43 and a Grumman G-21 Goose were purchased. In March 1949, 4 days' notice was given that Shmu was to close. This base was vital to Reeve, as it was an all-weather alternative to Adak, Amchitka and Attu. Northwest also needed the base on its run to the Orient. Reeve and Croy Hunter flew to Washington to plead their case without success, but on their way back to the hotel, Reeve met Major General Sam Anderson, who had served with Reeve's brother Richard, and explained their predicament with the result that the military were persuaded to pronounce the field militarily desirable, and thus Shmu was saved. S-43N15062 was purchased in March 1950. In late 1950, the bank was reluctant to loan Reeve any more capital. Reeve flew to Seattle in an effort to get a loan, but was turned down. He ran into Elmer Rasmussen, an Anchorage banker whilst in Seattle, with the result that Rasmussen loaned him $125,000 to get going again. On the day he got the loan, Reeve heard that Pacific Air Motive, who were doing his maintenance, were going out of business in Alaska. Reeve flew back to Anchorage and bought the business, which was renamed Reeve Air Motive. In 1952, the new Anchorage International Airport opened and all the other airlines moved there. The CAA was going to close Merrill Field, but it was retained for use by Reeve Aleutian and private operators. In 1953, final military deactivation of the Aleutian airfields occurred. Reeve obtained leases on Shmere and Cold Bay. Shmere closed in 1954 and all flights were switched to Cold Bay. In January 1957, DC-3N49363 was sold to 20th Century Aircraft. During the 1950s, St. George and Chernovsky were served by airdrop, Reeve installing salvaged bomb releases in his DC-3s to enable this. Expansion. By the mid-1950s, it was apparent that the DC-3s were not big enough for Reeve Aleutian. Therefore, the Douglas DC-4 was selected to supplement the DC-3s, eventually replacing them. Reeve's first DC-4 was purchased in March 1957 from 20th Century Airlines, which was going out of business. The first scheduled DC-4 flight was on March 12, 1957. The route was Anchorage Kodiak Cold Bay Adak Amkat Kashmir Atu. Umnik was served as required. In 1957, the distant early warning line was being constructed, bringing a boom to Reeve Aleutian. In 1957, an S-43 was traded in, 2 Curtiss C-46 Commandos were purchased from Cordova Airlines and Grumman G-21 Goose was leased from Interior Airways. Merrill Field proved too small for the DC-4, so Reeve Aleutian moved to Anchorage International in 1958. By the early 1960s, the DC-4 was proving outdated, and therefore a DC-6B was purchased in January 1962. 1970s. The late 1960s saw the emergence of the Lockheed L-188 Electra, which was to be backbone of Reeve Aleutian's business from then on. The first was purchased from California Airmotive in February 1968. With the acquisition of the Electras, the DC-6s were phased out of passenger service. Reeve Aleutian still had DC-3s in service, and a replacement was sought. The NAMCYS-11A was decided on and the first aircraft was purchased new in 1972. In 1973, the Electra was certified by the CAA to land on gravel runways. On November 11, 1974, there was a hangar fire at Anchorage, and 2 Electra aircraft were destroyed. In April 1977 the 2 Gooses were sold to Peninsula Airways, and their service subcontracted for services out of Cold Bay. In 1979, Reeve Aleutian initiated non-stop service between Cold Bay, Alaska and Seattle Tacoma flying the Lockheed L-188 Electra. This service lasted for 3.5 years. During that time, only 7 flights were cancelled due to weather and only 2 flights due to mechanical issues out of 458 scheduled flights. The jet age. In December 1983, Reeve Aleutian purchased 2 Boeing 727-022QC aircraft from Wiener, Alaska. During the Christmas 1985 holiday, there was a large backlog of mail at Seattle Tacoma, and Reeve Aleutian contracted with the USPS to relieve the backlog. The airline entered the 1990s on a relatively tight budget, with 3 aircraft mothballed and 1 leased out. In August 1999, Reeve Aleutian entered into a code-share agreement with Alaska Air on the route between Seattle, Anchorage and Petropavlovsk and Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk. End of operations. Reeve Aleutian ceased operations on December 5, 2000, and about 250 people were declared redundant. Reasons given for the situation included increased competition and high fuel prices. At the end, only 1 Lockheed Electra prop jet and 1 Boeing 727 jetliner were in service. Accidents. Several aircraft belonging to Reeve Aleutian were involved in accidents, late 1940s. DC-3N46567 damaged in a takeoff accident at Merrill Field, Anchorage. May 31, 1958. Curtiss C-46 Commando N-1302N written off at Driftwood Bay, Alaska. September 24, 1958. DC-4N63396 crashed on Great Sitkin Island, Alaska, 16 killed. May 29, 1965. DC-3N91016 damaged beyond repair at Nikolsky, Alaska. February 17, 1966. Curtiss C-46 Commando N10012 accident at Homer, Alaska, repaired and returned to service. February 10, 1971. Curtiss C-46 Commando N10012 written off at Non-Dalton, Alaska. June 22, 1972. Grumman Goose N1513V written off at Falls Pass, Alaska. November 6, 1974. Lockheed L-188 Electra N7140C destroyed by fire at Anchorage, Alaska. November 6, 1974. Namquai S-11AN-172RV destroyed by fire at Anchorage, Alaska. February 16, 1982. Namquai S-11AN-169RV accident at King Salmon, Alaska. June 8, 1983. Lockheed L-188 Electra N1968R, Reeve Aleutian Airways Flight 8 emergency landing at Anchorage, Alaska after a propeller separation. Subsequently repaired and returned to service. Destinations: Reeve Aleutian Airways served the following destinations during its existence. Denotes airdrop only. Alaska, scheduled service, Adakis, Amkatkais, Anchorage, Atkais, Attuis, Nikolsky, Sandpoint, Port Moller, Shmew Island, Cape Serich, King Cove, Falls Pass, Aquatan Island, Chneek, Chneek Lagoon, Chneek Lake, Ivanov Bay, Sanak Island, Periville, Cheranovsky, Cold Bay, Dutch Harbor, King Salmon, Kodiak, Port Hedon, Shmew is, St. George is, St. Paul is, Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, Umnik is, Charter Service, Aniak, Offery, Awana, Barrow, Beluga, Bethel, Bettles, Big Delta, Big Mountain, Cape Lisburn, Cape Newinham, Cape Romanzov, Cape Serich, Cathedral River, Clear, Coldfoot, Collinsville, Colorado Creek, Colville River, Cordova, Crow Creek, David River, Dead Horse, Dietrich Pass. Delta Junction, Dillingham, Drift River, Driftwood Bay, East Teachk Lake, 8 Mile Lake, Elielson AFB, Fairbanks, Farewell, Flat, Fort Greely, Fort Richardson, Fort Yukon, Franklin Bluffs, Frank's Cabin, Galbraith Lake, Galena, Gamble, Glacier Bay, Granite Mountain, Granite Point, GP1, Happy Valley, Helmrich Strip, Herendeen Bay, Homer, Ice Island, Icy Bay, Iliamna, Ikebeek Puke, Iniskin Bay, Ivotuk, Jade Mountain, Juneau, Kalakatek Creek, Kalibik Creek, Kenai, Ketchikan, King Cove, Kotzebue, Kulik, Lake Louise, Lake Mintumana, Longley, McCarthy, McGrath, Mintumana, Nenana, Nikolsky, Nome, Non-Dalton, Northeast Cape, Northway, Nyack, Ophir, Oliktok, Painter Creek, Pilot Point, Platinum, Pontilia Lake, Pullman, Port Barrow, Port Clarence, Port Moller, Pribilov Islands, Prospect Creek, Prudhoe Bay, Pocapiel, Rainy Pass, Red Devil, Roberta's Lake, Ruby, Sagwan, Sandpoint, Sandy River, Sritchv Cape, Servoonga, Senate Point, Sitka, Sitkanakis, Squintner, Stephen Lake, Sleep Mute, Soldotna, Sparvan, St. Mary's, Talkeetna, Tenalian Point, Tanana, Tatalina, Tin City, Trinity, Tunalik, Tunjak, Tionik, Ugashik, Umiat, Unalakleet, Ungalik, Utopia Creek, Valdez, Wainwright, Walakpa, West Forelands, Wide Bay, Wind River, Yakutega, Yakutat, Yakutat Bay. Continental USA and Hawaii, Everett, Honolulu, Houston, Portland, Seattle Tacoma. Canada, Dawson, Edmonton, Fort St. John, Hay River, Inuvik, Peary Point, Norman Wells, Whitefish Lake, Whitehorse, Yellowknife, Vancouver. USSR, Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk. Fleet, the following aircraft served with Reeve Aleutian. Beechcraft D-50 Twin Bonanza, one aircraft operated from 1959 to 1963. Boeing 727-100, two quick-change variants operated from 1983 to 2001. The B-727 was capable of being operated in a mixed passenger-cargo configuration as a combi aircraft and was the only jet aircraft type operated by Reeve Aleutian. Curtiss C-46 Commando, 5 aircraft operated from 1957 until the last one was sold in 1981. Douglas DC-3, 7 aircraft operated or leased from 1946 until the last one was sold in 1975. Douglas DC-4, 3 aircraft operated from 1957 until 1965. Douglas DC-6A, 1 aircraft was operated between 1963 and 1980. Douglas DC-6B, 2 aircraft operated between 1962 and 1978. Grumman Goose, 3 aircraft operated, 1 was destroyed and the other 2 were sold in 1977. Helio Courier H-250, 1 aircraft purchased in May 1965 and then sold around 1975. Lockheed Model 10 Electra, 1 aircraft operated and then sold in 1947. Lockheed L-188 Electra, 6 aircraft operated. First Electra purchased in 1968. 2 aircraft destroyed by fire with 1 aircraft still in service when the airline ceased operations. The 4-engine Electra turboprop was capable of being operated in a mixed passenger-cargo configuration as a combi aircraft. Named YS-11A, Japanese-manufactured twin turboprop. 4 aircraft operated with the first YS-11 purchased new in 1972. Sikorsky S-43, 2 aircraft operated with the first S-43 purchased in 1948. The S-43 was retired from service in 1957 with the sale of the last aircraft. Sikorsky S-39CS, 1 aircraft purchased in 1953. Livery, blue and red tail, with the lettering RAA in white. Blue fuselage with Regiate lines, and the name Reeve Aleutian over the middle passenger windows, in white. References. External links. Reeve Aleutian Airways, Reeve Aleutian Airways aircraft photos, giving some history of aircraft shown.